Denver Sports presents the Mile High Hockey Podcast with Mike Evans, presented by Fort Comfort Gutters. Now here's your host with the latest on the Burgundy and Blue, Mike Evans.
Hey everybody, welcome in, and what a great time it is as we are waiting, as I'm talking to you right now, we're waiting to see who the Avalanche play in the second round. Will it be Vegas? Will it be Dallas? We'll get to that in just a second, but got to look back on this terrific performance by the Avalanche in their first round against Winnipeg. And I think I'm, like a lot of you, wondering, do we have to change now our expectations, our belief in what this team is capable of? I remember prior to this series, we were talking, and I said, honestly, I don't know what to expect out of the Avalanche. Right now, I feel like they could easily go to the Western Conference Finals, or they could lose in the first round. That's how unsure I was about this hockey team. A lot of questions to be answered even after the regular season, especially after that 7-0 loss to Winnipeg. But my goodness, what a performance in that first round. And I love what I heard from Nathan MacKinnon, where he came out and said, we felt humbled going into the playoffs. We were humbled by the way we finished the season. We were humbled by that 7-0 loss to Winnipeg, and that we came in with a real sense of hunger, desperation, chip on our shoulder. And when you take a team that is as talented as the Avalanche and give them that motivation that makes them feel like they have something to prove, wow, that's a dangerous combination. Even though the Vegas wise guys, I think, understood that, hey, this Avalanche team, even with their issues, even with some of the questions surrounding them coming down the stretch, this is still a formidable team. Avalanche were favored in this series. Before the series, even after the loss to Winnipeg in Game 1, they were still favored. So not a huge surprise that the Avalanche won this series, but the way they did it is what has to make you feel so encouraged by what the Avalanche might be able to do in what could be a long, long playoff run and maybe another Stanley Cup, because I think it's fair to look at the Avalanche now and think that winning a Stanley Cup again is possible. Why? Well, because so much of what we saw in that first round against Winnipeg feels familiar, like what we saw from this team when they won a couple years ago. Let's start with the obvious comparisons. Your best players are playing at an obscene level. And when you have Cale Makar once again looking like the best defenseman, well, not once again, he always was the best defenseman in hockey for me. I know that Quinn Hughes will probably end up winning the Norris. Who cares? It's kind of like when Joel Embiid won the MVP. You just got it on loan for a year. We know who the best defenseman is in the NHL. It's Cale Makar, and boy, did he show that in that first series. But Val Nichushkin, just what a threat he is. His skill, his size, his ability and willingness to go into those greasy areas to make plays, to set plays up, to score goals out front. Arturi Lehkonen, as Jared Bednar emphatically said during one of his interviews during the series, this guy is hugely underrated when it comes to his place among NHL players. Nathan MacKinnon, it's funny because it was a series in which Nathan MacKinnon was good, but he wasn't their best player. He wasn't their best forward. And that's kind of good but scary, right, for the rest of the NHL? Mikko Rantenen. It wasn't until the last game, and it wasn't until the frustration boiled over after he fumbled a nice pass, breaks his stick in two, the height of the frustration, and then a couple of moments later, he ends up scoring the first of 2 goals in that game. So everything's rolling for the Avalanche. And yes, it starts with their best players being their best players and being dominant, much like when they won the cup a couple of years ago. But there's no doubt, and as somebody who has been doing this podcast since the Avalanche won their Stanley Cup, and if you've been watching, you know that I have been harping on the idea that the Avalanche have to get back to having the kind of supporting cast, starting with their second-line center, that they had during the year that they won the Cup. And it was something that was obvious last year that they didn't have the right supporting cast. It was obvious the first half of this season they didn't have the right supporting cast. The Avalanche admitted that. It wasn't me saying it. It was the Avalanche owner front office acknowledging the fact that they didn't have the right supporting cast last year with the moves that they made during this offseason and at the beginning of the season. And then they acknowledged again that they didn't have the right supporting cast by the moves that they made at the trade deadline. And can we agree that the deals that they made, and I know that when they made them, I came on here and said, on paper, it looks like the Avalanche made some really good moves at the trade deadline. Now we'll see in the playoffs if these moves pan out. And right now, it looks great. Casey Mittelstadt was terrific in that first round. MacKinnon, no less than an authority than MacKinnon, said he was their best forward in the first round of the series. But look at the comparison, tail of the tape, if you will, for the Avalanche in the first round last year against Seattle, a 7-game series that they lost, versus this Winnipeg series, first round, that they won in 5 games. 7 games versus 5 games. Keep that in mind as I give you these comparisons. Last year, 19 goals in the series against Seattle. This time, 28 goals in the series against Winnipeg. In fact, they become the first team since the 1979 New York Rangers to score that many goals in a 5-game series. Last year against Seattle, 7-game series, they had 9 different goal scorers. This time around, Winnipeg, 5-game series, they had 12 different goal scorers. Last year against Seattle, goal scorers with 2 or more goals, just 3. In this series, 8 different players with 2 or more goals. And finally, players last year with 3 or more points in the series, 7. This time around, 10. And that's in 2 less games. So what does that tell you? It tells you that the supporting cast came through big in that first series against Winnipeg. All kinds of contributions, up and down the lineup, all 4 lines. It was terrific. And we look at reasons to believe that the Avalanche have a chance to win a Stanley Cup. The biggest thing that was hanging over them for me was, would you get enough help around their supporting cast, from their supporting cast around their core? Would you get enough? Well, first round, they got it in droves, in bunches. So keep it up. Keep up that production. 1 line all the way down to the 4th line. Guys like Yakov Trenin making a great play with Duhaime, working hard. Cogliano, just that hard work that you get from the 4th line. If you look at this Avalanche team and the combination that they showed in that first round, the skill, the speed, the talent, the tic-tac-toe beautiful goals that you don't often see in playoff hockey. You got that. But you know what you also got? You got hard-working goals. You got the gritty goals. You got the guy standing in front, taking punishment, but still able to set a screen for a shot from the point to be able to get through. Or putting big bodies out in front like a Val Nichushkin. How about that tip from Mikko Rantenen where he gets the tip and Val is standing right next to him? He had 2 big guys in front of the goal. Connor Hellebuck said in the post-mortem of the series to Winnipeg media, he said, I'll tell you, I was in the zone going into this series with the Avalanche. I felt great going into the series with the Avalanche. And I can't believe that this series played out the way it did because I felt so good. He said, but there were times during this series where I just didn't see the puck. I couldn't see the puck. And boy, is that a compliment to give to a hockey team. When the goalie is somebody as good as Hellebuck, who's going to win the Vezina Trophy, is saying, there were times I just didn't see the puck. There was too much traffic in front of me. When you've got a team like the Avalanche that we know can score the pretty goal, the talented goal, the, oh my gosh, did you see that kind of goal? But can also then add that blue-collar, lunch pail type goal in the process along with those pretty goals. Woof. Well, they had 28 of them, right? 28 in 5 games, an obscene number. They weren't all pretty. Again, a great combination of skill, talent, but yet also hard work and grit that showed up from their offense. And I can't go any longer without talking about Alexandar Georgiev. You know who you are out there. You know who you are. The ones that were saying Alexandar Georgiev should never play another game for the Avalanche after game 1. Boy, they were out there. Now, I was certainly on board with the idea of maybe turning to Justus Annunen in game 2 or at least having a very short hook for Georgiev in Game 2, it remains a great unanswered question, right? What if? What would Jared Bednar have done if Justus Annunen was completely healthy, wasn't sick, hadn't missed practice, and was good to go possibly for Game 2? Would he have made that switch? And he has said all the right things in regards to Georgiev. That's a great what if. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. All that matters is what happened. And Georgiev, to his credit, bounced back after Game 2 when he knew that everybody back here in Denver, everybody across Canada was talking about how bad he was in Game 1 and that he was the fatal flaw for this Avalanche team. And he answered the bell. He really did. Give this guy a lot of credit. He won over a lot of people with the kind of mental toughness that he showed in bouncing back after Game 1 and was the better goaltender the rest of the series. He outplayed Hellebuck. So now here we are, the Avalanche after the first round. We are waiting to see who they play. And it's one of those questions that's fun to ask. Honestly, at this point, based on what I saw from the Avs, how can I not pick them to win in the next round against whomever they play, Vegas or Dallas? But, it's fun to have the debate about who would you prefer. And you can make the argument for either team. Like, there's part of me that says, I want nothing to do with Vegas. I want Vegas gone. I want Vegas eliminated. The Avalanche have had their issues with Vegas before. Vegas is, once again, playing that, little sly game that they play with long-term injured reserves, stashing guys, bringing them back for the playoffs. It's a loophole. I know a lot of you don't like the fact that Vegas does this. I have to ask, honestly, is your dislike for what Vegas does sort of deep down envy? Jealousy? Do you wish your team took advantage of the loophole like Vegas did? Do you wish that your team wasn't so nice and honorable about, hey, we can't, that's not the spirit of the rule, we shouldn't take advantage of it? Or are you kind of like, man, I wish my team took advantage of it just like Vegas did? But with Vegas, they are the defending champs. They're getting guys back. There's a part of me that just feels like if you let Vegas hang around in the playoffs too long, they may start to really find their game. They may start to sniff it, that sense of, hey, it's getting closer and closer, the chance to repeat. Let's go grab this thing. I just as soon get them eliminated. So there's one way of looking at it. The other way, though, of looking at it is, well, wait a minute, be careful what you wish for. Because if a Dallas team that lost to Vegas last year in the conference finals, lost the first 2 games of this series at home on home ice, is good enough to be able to come back and win this series, climbing out of that 2-0 hole, and that they're good enough to beat Vegas, good enough to avenge that loss to Vegas a year ago, are we seeing signs that Dallas is now starting to really learn how to win in the playoffs? And does that make them more dangerous than you would have thought? I've gone back and forth with it. And again, I don't think it matters. I do believe that if the Avalanche play whatever team they play, they win. It maybe is just more about a degree of difficulty. I've kind of arrived at the idea that I would probably rather play Vegas. Yeah, for a couple reasons. One, I don't know if Vegas is Vegas, the same team that they were a year ago. There's a reason why it's so tough to repeat. It's because you just don't have the same kind of vibe, the same kind of aura, the same kind of a mojo that you had going the year before. So take advantage of that, get them, knock them out, and you also get the added satisfaction of beating a Vegas team that's been a thorn in your side. So I think that's the reason why. And I think Dallas has shown enough during the season against the Avs. They got a pretty good team. And if they're now one of those teams that are learning from their painful lessons in the playoffs, like we've seen from the Avalanche, is Dallas a team now that's ready to take that next jump? And do they become a very dangerous team? I think for those reasons, I'd probably go with Vegas. But again, it's one of those things. Play Vegas, I think you beat them in 6. Play Dallas, maybe it's a 7-game series. I still like the Avalanche. So great first series, great first step. And I think it's fair for all of us now that some of the uncertainty that we had about the Avs going into this first round series should really be now replaced with a strong, healthy confidence that, hey, you know what? This team may have that same thing going for them that they had a couple years ago, and maybe, just maybe, we should start thinking about this team again as a serious Stanley Cup threat, maybe the biggest Stanley Cup threat, certainly to come out of the West. We shall see. It's going to be another busy week next week as we'll jump into the next series. Looking forward to it with you. Thanks to all of you who watched. Thanks to Sean Gates behind the scene for putting this all together. We'll see you next week on the Mile High Hockey Podcast.